Hey guys, it's Zach here from Sleeping Giant Wargaming. This is going to be our first video, and in today's video I'm going to go over my 93 point Team Yankee tournament list. So this is a first edition Team Yankee army. I know in around 2 months they're going to be updating to version 2, and there's going to be a couple changes that are going to happen. This list will change quite a bit, but for now this is the list. So it's 2 different companies. The primary force or company is a Marder Panzer Grenadier company for West Germans. So that is the commander here, who is my force commander overall. 2 platoons, full strength platoons of Marder Panzer Grenadiers. So that comes with 3 Marders, 2 Milan missiles, and 3 MG stands that also have, I think it's called Panzerfaust 44. 2 platoons of Luxes, they're 1 point each, so super cheap. A platoon of 6 Gepards, and then what that allows me to take is a platoon of 6 Fliegerfaust anti-aircraft missiles. And then my second company is a British chieftain company, armored company, that has a command unit of 2 tanks. The commander has the extra armor, I can't remember what it's called at this point, but the extra armor, the 2IC does not. 2 platoons of chieftains, where only 1 tank in the platoon has the extra armor. There I usually put it on not the commander. And then a unit of Scorpions, 4 Scorpions. So that's the force overall. I'll go into what everything does and why I took it. So let's start with the tanks. So the tanks, I think they're great value overall in Team Yankee. They're at 6 points a tank without the extra armor, and then it's 1 point per tank to take the extra armor. So they're 19 points for these 2 platoons, 13 here. When you take the extra armor, it increases the front armor up to 18, but you lose 1 on your cross rating. So what I'd like to do with these guys is, try and keep them out of terrain where they have to do a cross check, because the extra armor means that tank's only 3 up. But basically, try and use the mistaken target rule to put all the hits onto the guy with extra armor, meaning you're paying 1 point extra, and you're getting more value out of that 1 tank, and you don't have to spend 3 points for the whole unit, just 1 extra point. On the command unit, I put the extra armor on the actual commander because he actually has rules that you don't want him to die, right? Whereas here, because I'm putting all the hits onto the non-platoon commander, as much as the platoon commander just swaps whenever he dies, I'd rather him not be swapping around and messing up coherency. Whereas here, they're going to be actually targeting my force commander because he actually can give some bonuses. And then the Scorpions are just a great cheap little unit. They can deal with some tanks on the side, however they have 2+ firepower. What they're really great for is dealing with BMPs, because they'll just auto-pen their armor and then 2+, kill it, be done with. And they are fairly cheap, 4 points, so 1 point per vehicle. If I go over to my infantry, honestly, the Marder infantry are kind of attacks in that they allow me to take a lot of the great West German support. If I were really being completely optimal, this would probably be a force out of Panzertruppen, which is a little booklet that they came out with that was sort of the auxiliary units for the West Germans at that time. They were sort of moving a lot of equipment out, and so what that allows you to do is drop the Marders in places of M113s which obviously you lose the autocannon there, but in certain matchups the autocannon doesn't do a lot. And in place of those martyrs that you lost, you basically get to take an extra Milan. So for the same price, 7 points for the platoon, you get 3 Milan and 3 M13s instead of the martyrs. So if you're facing a lot of tanks in your play group, that would probably be a pretty good option. If you see a lot of light stuff, then maybe actually the martyrs can do some work, like BMPs. The martyrs can actually hurt, or in town we have a guy who plays American Airborne, and so the martyrs can actually go after his Sheridans, which are a very deadly vehicle if you don't have answers to them. Obviously the commander is my force commander, which is not ideal because he's not, usually you want your force commander up with the tanks to give them some bonuses to their morale and stuff. But yeah, he's an infantry guy for this list, which is not the best, but it's not terrible. These 2 units of Luxes, maybe one of the most point efficient units in the game. They can't do a heck of a lot, but for 1 point for 2 vehicles, especially in reserve scenarios under version 1, they're amazing. So oftentimes, if I'm in a reserve scenario, they just go into reserves immediately, and then you could look at it as if, I put one of these units in reserve, I can put a full unit of tanks on the board for that. So great trade-off. 1 point in reserve for 19 points on the table. And then in the back here for my anti-aircraft defenses, in town, we do see actually quite a lot of aircraft. I know other places around the world, other metas, people don't think aircraft are good or great or viable, but in town we do see a lot of it. So I bring the 6 Gepards, which will just shred aircraft at 40 inches. And then they're not going to take out a main battle tank from the front oftentimes. I believe it's anti-tank 11, firepower 4 up. But they can take out tanks from the side. And if you are facing a lot of BMP Swarm or Sheridans or light vehicles, these will just absolutely demolish them. You do have to be kind of careful. They have extremely low armor, but people fear the Gepards. And then what that allows you to do is, in the German book, you can take 1 Fliegerfaust stand effectively for every 1 either Gepard or Roland that you took in 1 platoon. So if I had 2 units of Gepards, I could take 2 platoons of these, up to a maximum of how many vehicles are in the platoon. So I have 6 Fliegerfaust. These guys are great if you do have a lot of anti-aircraft in your meta, because what happens is, for example, we have a local player who plays 4 A10s in his list. And what he likes to do with those is almost like a tank in an MMO video game. He will wait until his A10s come in. He has Cobras as well. He won't fire the Cobras. Fire the A10s first. They have a 3-up save. And so, as the defensive player, you're basically forced to make the decision, do I want to not shoot at his A10s and then wait to fire at his Cobras, but let his A10s fire at my anti-aircraft first? Or do I want to, realize that these A10s are just going to kill my anti-aircraft vehicles, and so I'm forced to fire at the A10s, and with their 3-up save, honestly, a lot of times you kill 1, maybe 2, and then their Gatling guns completely destroy your unit. So that's what I was finding a lot. I had Rolands instead of these, and that's what would happen. The A10s would come in, clearly be sitting, I think it's 8 inches or 11 inches or something on their Gatling guns. So he's going to fire out my anti-aircraft vehicles. I would be forced to shoot his A10s. I'd kill 1, maybe 2. He's pretty good with his saves, those 3-up saves. My anti-aircraft would be wiped out. He'd then fire his helicopters, maybe at my other unit of anti-aircraft, which he gets his gun ground when I shoot my anti-aircraft at him, so the helicopters would probably be fine as well because I'd be hitting on 6s. I'd maybe get 1 or 2 helicopters. He sometimes takes up to 8 Cobras as well. And then for the rest of the game, his aircraft, since he's taken out the vast majority of my anti-aircraft, I have some machine guns on my tanks and stuff like that, but it's not going to do a whole heck of a lot. He would just be able to run around killing me without me being able to do anything about it, and the game would basically be over at that point. So, what I found with the Fliegerfaust is all of a sudden his A-10s come in, or whatever it is, Frogfoots or something like that. And these are now dug-in infantry, probably gone to ground as well, right? So he's not going to be able to alpha strike them. Now sure, they have 3 shots each, firepower 5 up. They're not going to do the alpha damage of, say, like a Gepard. But they'll kill 1 or 2, probably 1, I think, A-10s a turn. But he's just not going to go for them, right? It's just not worth his time to try and plink them away, because by the time he kills this unit, it's later in the game, and he hasn't done the damage on the other parts of the board that he wants to do, right? He's wanting his A-10s to deal with my tanks. He doesn't want to, trade a 20-something point unit for 6 points of Fliegerfaust. So I found that if you are reliably facing aircraft, the Fliegerfaust is the way to go. Obviously in a matchup where there's no aircraft, they're just going to sit on an objective and do nothing. But there's reserve scenarios, you can put them in reserve, stuff like that. Another strong point for this list, why I bring it, is in a reserve scenario, which Team Yankee currently doesn't have a great way of trying to mitigate whether you're attacker or defender. You can use, there's a mission pack out there that you can, gives you a table where you can choose if you want to attack, defend, or maneuver. That I think the community has started to pick up, and that is honestly the best way of going about it. But a lot of times, right, you end up in a reserve scenario. So what do? So what this list does, currently in version 1, it is not the 60-40 split where you got to put 40% in reserve. What it is you have to put half of your units rounded up into reserve. So this list is great for that because it has tons of cheap platoons that you can just chuck in reserve and put all of your big guns on the table, so that points-wise, you're really not at that much of a disadvantage to your opponent. And then what will happen is you get benefits for oftentimes in missions for being the defender. So you get an ambush that they didn't get. And to a certain extent, having, in a lot of the defensive missions, right, you have an objective that you have to hold against your opponent. And his win condition is to take that from you. So in some ways that's a benefit, right? Because the downside of these chieftains is if I move, I lose a shot, right? They're basically points as if that's their Achilles heel, is if I move, I lose a shot. Because otherwise, if they just get to stand still and shoot all game, frankly, they're broken if they get to do that. So being the defender, this list wants to be the defender because it's far more likely that these guys are going to have to move, because they can just pick good position with good sight lines, and for the most part, your opponent's going to be forced to drive into them or deal with them in some way. So in reserve, what I'll often do, these 2 Luxes straight to reserve, depending on the matchup, but mostly Scorpions straight into reserve. And then, as far as I know, how we've been playing it in town is like independent teams or commanders are a unit, right? So my force commander, straight into reserve. So right there, that's 4 platoons that you can put on the board. So I go 1, 2, 3, likely 4, straight on the table. Depending on if they have aircraft or not, right? This is 6 points, straight in reserve. So that'll let me put another infantry platoon on. If they have aircraft, okay, well then these 2 infantry platoons go up. So this list ends up in a reserve situation not that bad off. That's going to be one of the changes for 2nd edition. The 2nd edition is going to go to the current V4 Flames of War rules, where it's going to be 60% points on, 40% off. In that case, I'm going to have to rejig my list a little bit, because in a reserve scenario it becomes much worse, right? Because at 93 points, right, like, these Luxes don't do much by going into reserve. So I think the Luxes are going to be one of the biggest losers of version 2, because they're really only good for their spearhead at that point. And the way that scoring happens, especially in tournaments, right? If your opponent realizes he's going to lose, he's going to start just going for platoon kills, and these Luxes go down very easily, right? You lose one vehicle, and sure, you have a 3+ last stand, but you're gonna start failing that pretty quickly, or they just one-shot the platoon. Another thing to go over is, say you want to do 100 points. I'm not sure what the new value is that Battlefront's going to set for tournaments. I suspect it's probably going to be something higher. So say you want to go to 100 points. This is 93. What would I bring in? So I reach over here. Just bring one of these out. I would put in a unit of 4 Lars, and with the mindlets, that brings the list up to 100 points. The Lars are fantastic for, in version 1, artillery is not great at killing infantry, because you do not have the repeat bombardment rule where infantry have to reroll their saves. That's going to be coming in version 2, and artillery will get much better. But the Lars do have the salvo, so especially Russian or Warsaw Pact forces running across the board, that salvo is going to tear them up, because, right, you don't need to do a firepower. So it kind of makes up for the fact that they're not having to reroll their saves. And for 1 point, Lars can take the mindlets, which, if your opponent's not aware exactly of what they do or not positioning correctly, the mindlets can be absolutely brutal, because you just shoot them directly onto an enemy tank unit. If they haven't positioned infantry nearby to protect against mindlets, that tank unit can have some real trouble. Infantry can very easily just clear the mindlets. They have to move into them. But if there's an infantry unit right beside those tanks, the mindlets might already even be shot onto the infantry. At that point, they just auto-clear on the next turn, and you're good to go. But the mindlets are great also because it doesn't matter what attempt you range in on, right? So a lot of times we'll just roll all 3 dice at the same time. It doesn't matter, right? So with the current Team Yankee rules in this list, I wouldn't have a spotter at that point, right? I would be relying on my force commander to do that roll. He's got a 3-up skill, so 3 dice needing a 3-up, a single 3-up, you're pretty much going to make that roll. If you have a spotter, 3 dice needing a 2-up, you're going to make that roll. So the Lars are cheap, fairly cheap option. The Germans have some pretty great artillery. I think the Panzer mortars are going to be great, and M109s, which pretty much every NATO faction gets, are also going to be pretty good. But Lars are great if you're having to deal with Warsaw Pact and you can't figure out what to do. So that's my 97-point list. This is our first video, so tell us what we can improve on. How's the lighting? How's the sound? How's the video quality? And see you guys next time.